But now, I'd like to get our three final speakers up on stage. And let's go ahead and bring them on up. Because we're going to be talking, we've got a great ecosystem who's going to be sitting with me here. The ecosystem of pushing for ideas, this innovation ideas. Where do ideas come from? How do you push and ideate to an individual then who takes these ideas and tries to make them work with clients, and then an individual then who looks for ideas to help and choose ideas to help make become real. So this is an entire ecosystem which I thought would be really interesting, or we thought would be really interesting to talk about as an ecosystem, especially when we're doing this backcast for this transformation, which you heard in this morning's panel, this topic of transformation. So let us welcome up to the stage Julia Roblick, Karel Golta, and Kerstin Gronau. Can you all come on up to the stage, please? Now, we need to have mics there. Thank you. And Gesundheit again. Okay, so you know the question I'm going to ask you now, and the first thing is, Kerstin, I've already asked you this, you can do it again because we're going to, for filming. What is it that everyone in the room needs to know about you in this context?
I think that when it comes to future, curiosity is one of the most important things, and that we overcome fear. So maybe a personal reference to that. I'm scared of water, and I'm scared of sharks. Like, I've never liked having my head underwater. What did I do? I became a dive master, and now I'm chasing like locations where I can go diving with sharks. Like just 2 years ago, I was diving with bull sharks in Mexico. So yeah, I think like curiosity is really important to have and to know it fears, but like the ones who are doable, just face them head onwards. And that also maybe brought me to the job where I am today. I have a marketing innovation management background. I was a long time in the retail department, but after 5 years I was like, okay, I've like grown personally here. I took everything with me I can. My goal is not to become a store manager, so what there's still left for me to do. And then I got this amazing opportunity to support the Innovation Map, where we now, with all of you being here, can follow one goal, and that's shaping the future together.
Fantastic. That's really great. And this is located in Vienna, and it's supported by the government of Austria, correct? Or not?
Yeah, almost correct. So like the Austral Federal Economic Chamber system is a unique system, probably. So it is stated in the law that it has to have this institution. And every company who is in Austria, they pay a mandatory fee to it, depending on the revenue. So the companies itself basically pay us. So that's why it's our challenge to give something back so that they can, it was useful for them and that really helps them. And with our tool, the Innovation Map, we want to give them a real tool in their hands so that they can also in the next upcoming years stay competitive and so overall make sure that Austria stays a competitive country.
Great, that's fantastic. I didn't know that. That's really cool. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm sure there are many companies who don't necessarily appreciate being told you have to, but it's really fantastic to see that flip and how you can give back with that. I think that's really great. Karel, what does everybody in the room need to know about you?
Well, I give you three things. A very personal one. I gave you my biggest failure and success, I would say. Right. Starting with a very personal one. My mother was a cake designer for special events. She was making huge boats for people that had a boat for their birthday, or a big car, for example, for Emil Frey, that has a big car garage in Switzerland. And she made these huge, humongous cakes, covered them with sugar, colored them, and things like that. For me as a kid, you know, of course I wanted to eat it, but it was like, it was too beautiful to eat it anyway. But that is something that really probably had some past dependency on what I became, because eventually I became an industrial designer. This is what I studied, and it's tightly connected with my biggest failure, which was the first product I designed, which was the very first MP3 player. 30 years ago, because I worked for the company that invented the MP3 format, and it completely busted, failed, didn't work, because it was just not well conceived. Anyway, that's a failure. I learned a lot from it. And one of my biggest successes, I would say, or a bigger one, was 10 years ago, the very first circular product that my company that I run designed. And we got something really kitschy. We got from our customer, every single team member of my company got a super heavy aluminum certificate that we developed this product for them. You know, something that usually is displayed at the entrance of companies that everyone from us would say, I think, that's so cheesy, that's so superficial, so not, but we were super proud because never ever before had a company that we worked for have given us any recognition in that respect. So that felt, as kitschy it felt quite well. And yes, today I run a global organization that helps companies, organizations to transition into the circular economy.
Fantastic. So you see already building from these ideas, innovation to circular economy. And Julia, what does everybody in the room need to know about you?
I'll always also give you a private fact and a more professional fact. So I think privately it's very important to know that I'm probably the contrast of you, Kerstin. I'm a water person, so I love being in the water, underwater, anywhere kind of like near water, because I grew up at the ocean, and that was also where my very close connection with nature is kind of rooted, I would say. So for me, it's always harder to be in a city or to be on land because I just feel so comfortable in water. And that kind of, I guess, inspired me also for the more professional way. I'm coming from I bring in the business perspective, but I was always believing in business as a force for good. So not only accounting for profit, but also taking into consideration people and planet. This was really my core belief. And I was also very convinced to always change the system from the inside. So that's why I wanted to start at the business side, kind of. And then I got a lot into social entrepreneurship, so very much coming from the impact entrepreneurship ecosystem. So founded my own company when I was very young. Then actually changed in helping other founders that also kind of created social business models with an impact angle to scale their impact, but also scale their business model. And eventually I thought, okay, how can I multiply my personal impact? Well, by stepping more into the investment side and already kind of like influence how the capital gets allocated. So now I'm also part of an impact investment model, but not a classical model. So connecting to the panel we heard this morning, maybe, not a classical fund, but more a community-driven approach, which is maybe not yet regenerative, but we're trying to get there at some point. So part of Better Ventures, and what we strongly believe in is that really founders are the driving force behind change and also behind implementing solutions that are, on the one hand, scalable and then also impactful. So we strongly believe we need to scale impact fast to kind of bring change. And maybe just a few words to give some context about Better Ventures. So we just invested generally in 52 companies along like the Sustainable Development Goals, and so far touched upon 14 out of the 17. So this just gives some context for my perspective today.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you, Julia. I think, and again, you can see this little ecosystem we got set up here. And what I'd like to do is like to stay with you for a moment, if you can.
Of course.
So we've seen Kerstin has like 100 different cards to provoke ideas. We're going to come to that in just a second. What kind of a framework do you use to decide if something's worth investing in? Hundreds of ideas, lots of people, we heard about this. How do you do this?
It's hard, first of all,
because
there's so many great ideas out there. So it's not easy to really choose. And as an investor, and we invest very early, so really idea stage or first like prototype stage, so very, very early. And you have a lot of opportunity costs, so you always need to really look, does it have potential? So how do we do it? The this might sound a bit not too deep. You called it before, but for us, it's anyways a lot about the team. So I would say 80% of our decision is based on the team and on the characters behind that. So we strongly believe in characters, but not so much skills. That as kind of like one important part of our decision. And the second is really what problem is the team tackling? Like, is it significant? What size is the problem? Is it really real? So we are always trying to go out, talk to potential customers, trying to find out, is it really needed? So that we can also kind of like be sure that there will be an impact. Yeah.
That's great. So looking at the team, so you send them through boot camp and you watch how they behave and
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, I mean, kind of actually. So our secret sauce, we do personality assessments actually in our analysis, just as like one. We don't base our whole decision on it, right? It's really just one data point that we take into consideration, also to kind of get rid of our biases, because everybody has biases in decision making, right? So we use these analyses tools to find out if the characters are complementary. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I've never known another investor who does that, so that's kind of very curious to me. So I'm going to come back to you now. Is it real? What Julia just said, she looks and says, is it real? People come to you, circular economy. Is the circular economy real?
Well, if they come with that question to us, then obviously it is real. But there's always some friction points, and whether it's the idea or the team, it matters all about the business case. We have realized that. So the circular economy is, by definition, not a circular communism or socialism. And this is what oftentimes we experience, that people come with an idealistic concept of the circular economy, taking everything in it. And we say, like, yes, you can do that, but we try to keep it apolitical by really putting it to the point that, yes, we have a planet with finite resources, but if we cannot convey business, that there's business to be won with circular principles, then it's a lost case. Because then it's all about carbon accounting topics, and they're very, very fuzzy still.
Yeah. So let me just stay with that for just a moment, and that is, one of our hopes for the future, for all of us in this room, is that we are in a circular regenerative world, right? And so we hear the rain recirculating now. Every dialogue has...
Nature has a voice.
Nature has a voice, and the helicopter had a voice, the lawnmower had a voice, each one has one. So what, if you think about for Le Punt with circularity, and stay with that for a moment, and what, with your work you've been doing in different parts of the world, what are some of the things we could be thinking about as we go into the next phase of our work?
So I think one of the most underestimated or undervalued viewpoint is to expand the system's boundary that we usually look at. We usually put it quite narrow. And this is the problem when in a linear value chain, you look at that, there's only the opportunity you probably have seized already to be seen. But as soon as you expand it to the boundaries of our planet, theoretically, then suddenly you will see that there are a lot of business opportunities. And by that, I mean, for example, right now with the rain, the stream is probably going to swell, okay? It will carry more water, and it's not going to stay in La Punt. So the question is, where is that water going to? Also where it's coming from, of course, but where is it going to? And you could say, well, I only want to look at it for the farmers that we have around it, or whatever it is. But actually, if we extend it to the very last point where it maybe ends, which is the oceans, to then be carried back to the clouds, then we suddenly can be mean or very capitalistic and say, like, hey guys, further down my value chain, you need to pay for the water that comes from La Punt. And suddenly you can, change the perception of the value in an ecosystem. And this is what we have to do more. More think about where's the system's boundary, how far can I extend it, and suddenly waste or resource, whatever it is, becomes, again, value in the entire ecosystem, and not just, philanthropy.
So we've, go ahead.
Totally. I just want to say this is kind of like a perfect example in what we're looking for, right? Like especially these ways to value creations. Yeah.
So I like that because we've talked about systems and systems thinking, systems boundaries. Even though we're in a very beautiful valley, we are part of a bigger system. A very beautiful village, part of a bigger system. This has come up a couple of times. I think it's quite important to talk about. Kerstin, when you work with the companies, when you have been sitting with them now with your cards, what kind of reaction do you have to some of these things which we saw, which are some kind of crazy, like wow, and they're like, okay, you could do this now, and what do you observe from them? Because you work with the KMU, the small and medium-sized enterprise, which are the lifeblood of this valley as well.
Yeah, so oftentimes there's lots of different reactions. So oftentimes at the beginning when we are coming, they're like, what are we even doing here? Why do we need to talk about the future? Like we have current issues now, like they're just thinking about how can I make more revenue next year? And they don't see like the bigger plan. So sometimes we have that challenge already. Like how do we even get them on board that they listen to us and that they're willing to even work with us basically? Because sometimes they're not quite sure what they signed up for if they come to a workshop with us. Oftentimes they also think when it's something with like future in the title, oh, they're gonna teach us how to use ChatGPT and AI tools because like we are from the innovation and digitalization department, so they will teach us that. And we're like, no, this is already here. We are more on the 10 years plus scope with our cards. And then you can also see when they're working with the cards that everyone truly has a different vision of the future. So some of them, they started discussing with us like, yeah, but why is this on a future radar? That's already happening there and there. Like it's already in some kind of form implemented somewhere. So why does it have the allowance to be on your radar? And other ones like, what? This is already possible? Like, no, we don't want that. And what we often see as well, and I also had some of the discussions here, is sometimes fear overcomes us. Again, the fear topic. And they're like, if we give them, they don't accept it. They go right into, no, we don't want that. No, I don't want to try out a vision with it. And we're like, yes, but on some of these cards, we have already missed that crossroad where we can decide whether they are coming or not. On some, we still have the possibility, but on a lot of them, we've passed that crossroad. So it's about, they are coming, but what we still can change is how are they coming? Yeah. And if we then focus on a positive mindset and more on the positive outcomes and not let fear drive our decisions, then overall, if more people will do it, more positive stories will be told, and we have a chance that as soon as the word future is falling, that we don't only have like the negative news headlines in our mind, but that we see real opportunities.
I can second that, by the way, not by myself, but a colleague of mine, Renee Lertzman, who is a climate psychologist, a person that would perfectly fit here next year, by the way, because she has put out a framework with the AAA for anxiety, ambiguity, and aspiration. And she says, like, if we do not first acknowledge that people are afraid of change and of the climate transformation and so forth. And if we don't acknowledge that, it's going to be impossible to actually start to work with them. She also says that we have to work with their ambiguity because they go like, hey, I love a burger, but of course I want to be somehow sustainable. Or I want to fly to Mallorca once a year, but I know I shouldn't, kind of a thing. And the last is, everyone, except for Putin, everyone wants to do good and be on the winning side, right? I mean, everyone wants to do that. And this is where the aspiration comes in. So it works perfectly.
I think your list was a little short there right now, but
just because of time. Yes. Should we do a brainstorming?
Yeah, we're brainstorming on that one. Go ahead,
but
Kerstin.
also on that, because yes, we have to totally see that. So what we also don't want is that we diminish the people's feeling and say like fear is not okay.
Totally.
That's why we integrate in our workshops, and we do it like very similar, like all of this is concepted here. We also have always the guidelines at the beginning that everything is like, has an opinion here, everything is valid. But we very consciously always say when we go into the vision step, let out regulations. Yes, we know they will come in play afterwards, but let's like make the cone very far apart at the first step and not narrow yourself in your mind at the beginning. And if some of these blockades come up, there's a parking lot. We call it the fear parking lot. And whenever you have that thought, write it down because it's valid and it has room. But today we focus on something else. And so that we have made the experience really helps the people. And then also, yes, of course, the next steps will be backcasting then, and then they come into play again.
Perfect. That's really great. It was very, very important for us with our backcasting, with our project. So, did you want to add something? Okay.
Just a quick thought.
Yes, you do. Go ahead.
I think we really have to work together on that, because you were just saying like fear is often in the way. On the entrepreneurial side, there is no fear. And sometimes we wish there was probably more fear. Not like, don't get me wrong. But I think failure is great, and we also embrace failure so much. But I feel like giving something back and sharing these two totally different cultures would be so value-adding in this whole process.
Balance it out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a fascinating point. I mean, you just made that. You almost see no fear again and again and again. You kind of wish, okay, wish you'd think a little bit more.
That goes back to like the personality trait probably of an, let's call it entrepreneur, probably from the books, is like fearless, extremely fearless, actually extremely open, extremely proactive, extremely flexible, and extremely impatient.
I like this because we have all been doing the backcast now. We started doing this. What are some things which you believe that you in your three groups? Are you in the same group? No one's in the same group.
We too.
You're in the group. Okay. So in your two groups. Okay. Some thoughts that we should be taking with us. I like your 3 A's. Like, what are some thoughts you want to share for us in the backcasting from your ecosystem view? What would you, Julia? Go ahead.
Happy to start.
Yeah, please.
Because we used it a little bit in our group. I'm trying to find my group, but I'm not sure. Hello.
The back row boys. Here we are. Okay.
So maybe something we can learn kind of like from the startup ecosystem is kind of like the way of how to iterate. So we always start with a very small prototype. And this can be applied kind of to like any business model, can also be applied to impact models, right? So what's a prototype of an idea? You go out, speak to a lot of potential customers, go out really, you have to put yourself out there, that's the most important part. And then take the learnings, iterate again. Work on your MVP, we call it, so minimum viable product, and then develop it further until you really have kind of like, I think there's not even a perfect product, so it always iterates, right? It always changes, but this kind of like very lean and pragmatic way of just like prototype, iterating again. Yeah, this is something we can.
Sounds familiar, right?
Absolutely. I'd like to build on that. 2 things or 2 tricks maybe. The first one is what often is neglected in when we build concepts that we then try to, that we ourselves get excited, the many ideas we have. I'm always propagating that we are irresistible. An idea needs to be irresistible. And not only to the founders, but actually to business. So you really have to you have to outperform existing business model, because otherwise people go like, you have to be like, oh my God, I can make shitload of money. This is what irresistible. Very egoistic almost. Then you go to the customer actually, or consumers, whoever it is, the human side. It has to be irresistible as well. This is oftentimes where sustainable or even circular solutions fail, because they're just so technical that it's not cool. It's just not cool. And the third part, of course, is it needs to be irresistible for the planetary boundaries. We have to think like that. We also have to, or think of the planet as a person or persona, and think, would that solution be irresistible, better than what we have now, and then we are regenerative? So that, I think, is a very powerful part to think about a solution.
I think that's really powerful. I like that idea of, and for all of us, when we think of our characters, is this backcast irresistible? It's kind of interesting. I like that. Oh, I want it so. I think from an architectural standpoint, very often we see a new part of renovation, and you even forget that it's new. It makes so much sense. In contrast to something you kind of go, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. This is the irresistibility. Okay, what I'd like to do right now, do you want to?
I just wanted to add one more thing.
Yeah.
I think the parallel development is also important because we had that quite a lot in ours. And also referring to the background where we are coming from, we do, of course, have a advocacy party in our department as well. And so it's important that we create safe spaces that are nowadays regulation sandboxes, that we can try it out before we actually implement it to the market. Because why is that important? It gives us a safe place. It reduces risk in certain ways. It modernizes the regulations, which are oftentimes our biggest challenge as well. It's not integrated in new systems and new ideas. They are not fitting into current systems, regulations, whatever they might be. But why it's so important, if you develop it together and not just the product is firsthand and then we go oh, we need because we are already ready for market. But we take the regulation side from the start with us. So we're building trust, we're building these bridges that we need between all the different stakeholders. And that's what we tried a lot in our backcasting process as well. And I think we will need to focus a lot more on that in the future.
Very good point. Really good point. I see all of you violently, all heads going, yeah. Get all the folks together. Okay, you've got 5 minutes right now to discuss some questions for our 3 panelists right now. Who has a question they'd like to pose? Okay, see one back, Andreas, Mr. Figali, and then we're going to come over here to this side of the room. We're going to stay over here. The back row boys again. Okay.
Okay. I want to pick up this AAA. Anxiety, ambiguity, and aspiration idea, and I think we are here people from all over the world having these fantastic ideas how La Punt will look in future, and we go out, we show the people, and listen, we have these fantastic ideas, that's what you should do, and all we get back is anxiety. Why me? Why us? Who are you telling me how we should change? And how can we approach this part? How can we get to the aspiration of people, acknowledging their anxiety?
Storytelling. So storytelling, I try to give you a practical example. When you deal with people that are afraid of flying, you don't tell them the physics of aerodynamics, because they will go don't believe in that, right? You do it differently. You first literally acknowledge it. So in our storytelling, what we can do is, like you said before, going out to the customer, understanding the customer, you have to anticipate truly, like in psychological sessions, the anxiety someone has. So, you're afraid that too many tourism will come. Oh my God, you have to really start at that point, because then you level set them in their comfort zone. And then you also would, for example, go to the ambiguity and say, okay, completely, I hate that too. I love burgers and Mallorca. And like that, it's already, that guy, that's a nice person, okay. And then you can come with your hook. Because eventually you want them to fly.
That's okay. All right. Any others? What do I keep going? Next, Christian.
Great discussion, thank you. And my question was, I see a lot of startup spin-offs and so on in early stage, even before. Like we have at the ETH this fantastic place called Student Project House. And a lot of those projects are fantastic, and they don't come over because lack of finance, for instance, lack of ideas, and philanthropy. And I think the question is for me, for you, is where is the limit where we can consider something being philanthropic to develop something in social responsibility products, for instance, and where does the financial system grasp so that you can take over? Because I think there is a lot of ideas which are too idealistic for investors, but which have definitely an impact on social responsibility, for instance, or impact in
Thanks,
other
Christian.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, there are a lot of different like financing instruments for a lot of different kind of impact models, I would say. And from our perspective, it really starts. So what we always say is the business model needs to generate €1 or Swiss franc of revenue, but simultaneously also create one impact unit, whatever that might be, depending on the industry. And then it's a case that we look at. So it really needs to go like hand in hand. So as the revenue grows, the impact grows as well. Can be like, I don't know, like tons of CO2 stored, can be cancer patients treated, can be, you know, that's usually the two criteria we look at so that it's relevant for us in our case.
Thank you. Interesting. Next question.
So this question is for Julia. You mentioned that your VC fund kind of assesses the personalities of the founders. Can you kind of go into what you're looking for? Because, for example, I would imagine that early day Apple is every VC's dream, like investing in Apple back in the early days. But then again, apparently Steve Jobs was one of the worst human beings in terms of likableness and how he treated people. But then again, he was a genius when it came to kind of pushing this vision. So how could you kind of...
Okay. Got the question.
Yeah.
There we go. Go for it.
Just a quick remark, we're not a fund, but we can talk about that later. So what are we looking for in characters and personalities? So first of all, always a combination of different characters, so diverse characters. And as I said, so we always look at 4 different dimensions in a character, and there should always be like one more like venturer type of person in the venture. So one that's actually very independent, extremely extroverted, very, very much impatient, and gets energy from a lot of like flexibility and changing environments. So the personality is kind of like shown like this in a graph. But then we also want someone who's very complementary. So for example, this first person is very risk-affine. The second one should be more risk-averse, just because someone needs to protect the company as well. And the other person should be a bit more reflected and introverted, for example, because someone needs to sit down and actually break down the big vision into like actionable points. That's just one example. And then there's a lot of actually research that also shows if people went through traumas, they are actually better founders because they're more resilient and they know how to pivot when things get hard. And I promise you they will get hard.
That's great. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Kerstin.
I think just to jump onto that, because we did, in my bachelor's, the last year is a whole year where you have a project group. You work with real companies. You basically don't have any classes anymore. And you had in the year before the assessment, like, okay, get your group together. You will be working with them for a whole year. And most of them, because we were young students, we were like, oh, I like this person. This is my friend. I'm going with this friend. But in other classes before that, in conflict management, we had already had those personal discovery profiles as well, was like colors, and we were one of the few who were like, no, we don't win this, we don't make the best outcome if we just choose our best friends. We have to see, what are my skills, what is my character, what am I missing? So, and that I think was one of the reasons why we were successful as a group. And we were not best friends, there were a lot of personal issues sometimes, of course, but for the work itself, it needed exactly that constellation, and that shows if you do it for the purpose or like for the impact you want, or just because you want to be like profiling yourself the best because you work with that best friend together.
Wonderful points. How many of you work with various personality assessment tools when you're looking at teams? Who's done this before? All right. We've done it too, so. On this side of the room. What's your question?
Yeah, so you spoke about this circle system, but my problem is I don't know how it works. Can you explain it maybe how this circle system works?
Which circle system? There are so many.
Circular economy.
Yeah,
The principles.
yeah, I don't know how
So
this works.
the easiest part probably would be if you talk to Reto in the back, who is also representing the compost toilets, for example. And if you think about what you eat becomes, of course, also what you output. And that, again, is a fertilizer for what you eventually will grow that you then can eat again. And there you go, you have a closed circle.
So the idea is
For
that
example.
one thing becomes you keep using things for their best purpose. Keeps going around and around and around. It's like it's just no waste. There's no such thing as garbage.
There's no concept such as waste,
And
exactly.
there's
That's
no
what we-
planet called away that we throw things to.
Yeah, that was a circle, exactly.
Yeah. You're already doing it, dude.
Yeah,
You got it. You
it's
already know
actually
it.
innate. We're part of the circle.
You're living
Always
it.
been.
Yeah. Good question. Go, Alex.
So we had a very similar question, so just to build on it quickly. In the character assessment over skill set assessment, we were curious about, are you thinking about diversity and how so? And second is, if there's sort of, you're prioritizing character first, how do you compensate or get around a lack of skill set as the company or team evolves?
So diversity, yeah. So diversity in terms of characters first, in terms of backgrounds, in terms of experience, in terms of gender, in terms of culture. So actually, so you know, we have a criteria set of like 120 investment criteria. 120.
120 criteria.
So just give you like a small part. And the second part, how we compensate, right? If actually with our investment approach, because as I said, we're not a fund, we are a community of previous entrepreneurs. And we want to bring in the experience, and we want to, support young founders that maybe don't have the experience yet, but then get it via working together with the different founders of our community. Yeah,
That's really cool. Thank you, Julia. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Samuel has one last question. I've just seen his hand sneak up, and then we're gonna come to a wrap.
I was wondering, because you said also that you will also have criteria or assess the impact that an enterprise or a project could have. And I was wondering whether there is a way of also measuring or connecting that to the planetary boundaries and like see, okay, this is not only a little bit more sustainable than what is the business, the conventional business right now, but this is actually sufficiently more sustainable so that we can keep within planetary boundaries, because we were also thinking planetary boundaries is like an aggregate concept on planetary or maybe national level, but then an enterprise is such a smaller entity. Like, is there a way to translate between those two?
okay.
That was to you, actually.
I'll
Sorry,
go
you're still in the
first. No,
spotlight there. Go for it. Very
So,
quick answer.
No, I mean, we know about the planetary boundaries and we use them especially for mapping out our investment fields. Also like where to actually make investments. We're not using them yet in our really like investment decision. I'm sure there are tools that kind of rely on that, but we came up with our own impact thesis, because we're not only investing in ecological issues but also social, so we needed something that's very generalistic and like easy to apply to like so many different industries. So we kind of like squeeze it down a bit to a very pragmatic impact logic that we always have at the beginning, and then depending on the certain industry, we go in with like individual KPIs that are measurable.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. I would like to ask you all one final question that has to do with all three of you. Tomorrow, we've got the backcasting. Tomorrow, We're going to have, 20, 30 people coming from the community in addition to us. And what would be some incredibly, what was the word you used again?
Irresistible.
Incredibly irresistible ideas which we might see, would you like to see in the back cast, from your standpoints, could be really interesting to incorporate?
I think it's important that we apply one easy rule that's often like, if you want to convey someone that they use it, portray it as that's their own idea. So how can we sneak in maybe some already solutions for the community? For example, the in-hub. The in-hub could be perfect for becoming one of those mentioned regularly sandboxes. It can become one kind of a safe space. So how can we maybe integrate it somehow, but don't make it too obvious, so that they still think at the end, once they heard the story, that it was their own idea, that they own, that they already, by hearing our solutions, they're thought, oh, there's also some spark in there we could use for ourselves. Maybe we could deepen into that one.
That's a really great one. I use that sneaky technique in my corporate life too. Yes, that was very good.
There's a reason why it's successful.
Yeah, it works. Let it become their idea. Excellent. So sandboxes, thinking for the sandbox, especially the regulatory. I was asked earlier about regulation and how to incorporate that. Julia, what about you?
Well, I have to bring in the kind of finance perspective, I guess, because we've heard or we've talked about so many different technologies, ideas. So I'm always thinking okay, how do we finance them actually? How do we finance the whole transformation?
That's for sure.
And when thinking about La Punt, I kind of had to think probably back to our model that we have a little bit. So I was telling you at the beginning, we have a community behind us. And then I thought, okay, why not let the community participate in that? So something like community-based financing. There's so many different stakeholders here, from we heard very rich people to small businesses. Maybe everybody can just, put in a part that they are able to put into, and then really have the community participate in the financing of this.
That's a great idea. So a community fund focused on the community, which is sort of becomes a self-help, self-actuating, self-empowering thing that could happen. And that could happen earlier so it could have results. Cool.
Well, let me try to close. If we have a sandbox that we then can grow to a community, I think we then need to scale it even further, because I think great solutions need scale. So the question would be that I would be looking for answers. How can we give the things we have here a voice that has a reach? That has a reach beyond the sandbox eventually, the community, but goes, throughout the entire Engadin.
Amplifies. Yeah.
Amplifies, exactly.
And how would we do that, maybe?
We plug it into a loudspeaker, and no, it's right now. You only to really. I mean, it's a good question, and I don't want to only have jokes. I think the problem here is it usually doesn't get out of the belly. If you're not here, you're not experiencing it. So how can we nowadays that everything is connected? How can we give anyone on the planet access to the resources that are here, at least on a virtual level? That's a pragmatic
Good challenge.
approach.
Hey, I want to thank the three of you. As a perfect way to close out our day, let me thank you, and let's give them a nice round of applause.